It must seem sometimes like all languages, I mean, every language all around the world, they're all completely different from one another. But there are also a number of characteristics that are common to languages around the world. To begin with, all languages are more or less symbolic. They're all a bunch of symbols. Writing systems or scripts, they're an obvious example of this. You know, letters or characters. They represent sounds or ideas or words, right? The letter A is a symbol that represents a different sound from the letter G. However, letters and characters are not the only examples of symbols in language. The sounds we make are also symbolic. Why, for instance, do we call a particular fruit an apple? Is there something about those sounds that inherently makes you think of the fruit itself? Of course not. Different languages use different sounds to indicate this particular fruit. The sounds we use in English for this fruit, the a, the p, the l, they're all just symbols. Well, gestures. Remember body language? Gestures too are symbolic. Why should you think that holding up your index finger means one? In French culture, say, that same upheld index finger can mean be quiet or wait. So all languages and all aspects of language, written, verbal, gestural, they're all symbolic. All of this has to do with culture, right? And language is a key element of culture, of every culture. But we sometimes think that language is somehow biological, maybe. I don't know. Maybe because we use our brains to formulate language, and we use our lips and tongues and voice boxes and lungs to produce language. Indeed, our very biological makeup predisposes humans towards speech, including the shape of the voice box, the positioning and flexibility of the tongue, and the dedication of large areas of the brain towards linguistic memory and vocalization. So language must be biological. Well, no, actually. Our capacity for language acquisition is biologically derived, certainly. You can acquire and communicate with language because you have a brain. And particular areas of the brain are directly involved in such things as learning vocabulary and pronunciation and grammar. But the language you speak is not determined by your brain. We have no language in our brains at birth, no default mode, no structure that says, based on your race, you must learn Thai or French or Swahili. We learn language, and we learn it from our culture. Therefore, while the ability to learn and use language is biological, the language itself, the language you use, is cultural. Thus, this too is common with languages around the world. The languages we speak are cultural constructs, are made by culture. And at least our first language out of the some 7,000 languages spoken in the world today is culturally determined, not biologically determined. Every child, no matter where they are born in the world, has the same capacity for language acquisition, for learning any language, not just a particular language. Consequently, a child born in the United States to English-speaking parents will learn English as his first language, obviously. And he'll learn English at about the same rate as all other children around him. All the other kids who are growing up in the United States and learning English as their first language, in the span of his life, for as long as he lives and learns, this kid might pick up 5, 6 languages. However, it's his culture that determines which language he learns first. If that same child were to be adopted at birth by, say, a Chinese-speaking family and brought to grow up in a village in China, he would just as easily, just as quickly learn perfect Chinese as he would have learned English. And that is obviously not because Chinese is more accurate than English. All languages are accurate, right? If your language were not accurate, if it didn't communicate precisely enough what you wish to say, then you wouldn't use it. When a Chinese man tells his wife, 我爱你, those sounds, those words, presumably convey exactly what he wishes to say. Just as when I tell my wife in English, I love you, or a Turk tells his wife, seni seviyorum, or a man speaking French tells his wife, je t'aime. To us, each of these may sound not only different, but wrong if we don't speak those languages. But to the native speaker, to the Chinese or the American or the Turk or the French speaker, these expressions are absolutely correct. Nonetheless, the language you speak may continue to be psychosocially influenced, affected by psychosocial factors throughout your life. The cultural environment around you impacts your inclination to speak particular languages. We see this all the time, especially with children and adolescents, who are often more sensitive to how their peers see them. Let's say you live in New York and you speak Spanish fluently, while your husband speaks English, and you wisely decide to raise your daughter bilingual. As a young adolescent, she speaks English and Spanish fluently, but in school, all her friends, all the kids she wants to hang out with, get along with, they speak English only. So this bilingual kid chooses to speak only English. Even at home, when her mother speaks to her in Spanish, she might answer her mother in English. English for her has become the safe identity language, the identity that helps her to fit in with her friends, with her cultural environment. Finally, and this may seem a strange point to make considering we're learning here about human culture, but language is not exclusively human. While no other creature in the world possesses the intricate verbal communication skills of humans, the ability to communicate is not only a human ability. Bees perform an intricate dance when they return to the hive with information about a source of pollen they have discovered. Primatological and zoological studies have revealed how many species are actually able to communicate with one another using symbolic sounds and signals, as with the orangutan Chantek. Chantek was able to learn and use a gesture-based form of communication, American Sign Language, from which he acquired some 150 different signs to communicate with humans, just as Koko the gorilla learned over 100 signs.